What would you do if a toxic employee, who you legally couldn't fire, tried to blackmail you into getting her way by threatening to quit? In today's story, a new business owner's response is a masterclass in how to turn the tables. My friend, who I'll call Laura, worked at a travel agency in British Columbia, Canada. It was a cozy, owner-operated business, with just the owner, my friend Laura, and 2 other employees. Their days were standard, Monday to Friday, 9 a.m. M. to 5 p.m. M. But within this small team was a long-standing problem. One of Laura's coworkers, an older woman in her early to mid-60s named Eleanor, was a chronic nuisance. Eleanor was always engaged in sketchy behavior, but her specialty was scamming ways to get more time off than she was entitled to. Her signature move was to claim overtime pay to make up for the hours she took off. She'd alleged she came in on weekends or after hours to finish up work, despite never being asked or authorized by the owner to do so. She was caught in her lies multiple times and warned about the unsanctioned overtime. Yet the owner was terrified to discipline her properly, let alone fire her. The reason for this fear was a cautionary tale from Eleanor's past. The owner had discovered, after hiring her, that Eleanor had been fired from another local travel agency for pulling the exact same stunts. However, Eleanor had sued her former employer for unfair dismissal and had actually won a settlement. This reveals the core of Eleanor's strategy: manipulation through litigation. She used the legal system not as a shield for justice, but as a sword to protect her misconduct, which ultimately sealed her reputation as an untouchable nuisance. The owner, fearing a similar lawsuit, felt her hands were tied. A few years into my friend Laura's tenure, the owner decided to retire and offered to sell the business to her. Laura, excited by the opportunity, accepted the deal and took over, keeping both Eleanor and the other employee on staff. Just like the previous owner, Laura was wary of being sued and was initially afraid to get rid of Eleanor. Upon taking charge, Laura immediately instituted clear guidelines for taking time off and, crucially, established a strict no overtime policy. This clipped Eleanor's wings considerably. She still tried her old shenanigans, but she was far less successful with Laura in charge. Still, Eleanor had one last trick she liked to use to get what she wanted. Laura was a divorced single mother of 2 boys who were both passionate about youth hockey. This meant she occasionally had to leave the office an hour or 2 early to get them to a practice or a game. Eleanor learned to weaponize this. To avoid having a request denied face-to-face, she would wait until she knew Laura had left for the day and then book time off for herself. Laura would arrive the next morning to find she was a person down because Eleanor had simply decided not to come in. For a while, Laura let it slide. With a no overtime policy firmly in place, Eleanor couldn't claim the hours back later. She would either lose a day's pay, saving Laura money, or have to use one of her paid vacation days. Since 2 people could generally handle the workload, it was essentially a no-loss situation for Laura. But then came the breaking point. Laura had a big hockey tournament coming up for her boys, which required her to be away for 1 or 2 workdays leading into the weekend. She gave both Eleanor and the other employee ample notice, both verbally and in writing, that they could not book time off for those specific dates. She needed both of them there to cover the office while she was away. A few days later, Laura went into the office on a Saturday to catch up on paperwork. While reviewing the week's sales, she stumbled upon a startling discovery. Just the day before, Eleanor had booked a trip to Las Vegas for her daughter and son-in-law. At the same time, she had booked a plane ticket for herself to Calgary, where her daughter lived. The dates for both the Vegas trip and Eleanor's flight to Calgary just happened to coincide perfectly with the dates Laura had explicitly blacked out. A quick check of the vacation schedule confirmed it. Eleanor had gone in and booked the days off she had been expressly told were unavailable. Laura decided to handle it carefully. She sent an email to Eleanor, not mentioning the travel bookings she had discovered. She simply reminded Eleanor that she had to deny her request for those days off, reiterating that she would be away and needed her in the office. Eleanor's emailed reply was a masterwork of deceit. She outright lied, spinning a story about her daughter needing to receive some long-awaited medical treatment or surgery in Calgary. She claimed she absolutely had to go to help out for a few days and look after her granddaughter. Laura now had her in a corner. She replied, laying her cards on the table. She told Eleanor that she knew about the Las Vegas trip she had booked for her daughter and son-in-law. She pointed out that Eleanor's trip to Calgary was obviously to babysit her granddaughter while her parents were in Vegas, and for that reason, especially since she had booked the time off, After being told she couldn't have it, the denial stood. Eleanor's response was breathtaking. Without even addressing the fact that she had been caught in a blatant lie, she pivoted to playing the victim. She wrote about how she had been a dedicated employee for years and couldn't fathom why she was being treated so unfairly after everything she had done for the business. Then came the ultimatum. Since she wasn't being treated as a valued employee, she wrote, she had no choice but to retire and was giving her 2 weeks' notice. Eleanor made a critical error at that moment. Believing her lie and her threat gave her leverage, she was completely unaware that in her haste and arrogance, she had just handed Laura the exact key she needed to solve her biggest problem for good. Laura simply replied that she would still be unable to grant the days off and left it at that, making no mention of the retirement threat. Immediately, Laura contacted her accountant, who also served as her business advisor. He was well aware of Eleanor's history. When Laura explained the situation and forwarded the email chain, his response was immediate. This is the out you've been looking for. You have it all in writing. He explained that Eleanor had, in legal terms, resigned. All Laura had to do was accept it, pay her for her final 2 weeks in lieu of her working them, and no further severance would be legally required because she had resigned. She hadn't been fired. It's a classic bluff, one that many problem employees try to pull. As one person who heard this story noted, they'd seen it happen twice before where difficult employees theatrically declared, "I quit," only to have an HR manager immediately respond with, "Accepted." It's a power move that, when documented, rarely ends well for the one making the threat. The following Monday, Laura went into the office early. She brought her long-term boyfriend with her to act as a witness. She carefully packed Eleanor's personal belongings from her desk into a box. She also collected items that were business property, including a small index card box. Eleanor, being old school, had resisted using the computer database and kept all her client information, phone numbers, addresses, and even credit card details, on these cards. The other employee arrived, and they all waited. Just before 9 a.m., Eleanor walked in, acting as if nothing had happened. "Good morning," she chirped, her voice full of false cheer. Her confident demeanor faltered for a second when she saw Laura's boyfriend sitting in the corner of the office. She was halfway to her desk when Laura spoke, her voice calm but firm. "Eleanor, there's no need to go any further. I've accepted your notification of retirement." Laura then handed her a check. It covered the hours she had already worked in the pay period, plus 2 full weeks' wages in lieu of her notice. The color drained from Eleanor's face. The casual confidence vanished, replaced by sheer panic. "But I didn't retire. I'm not ready to retire," she stammered, her voice rising. Laura held her ground. "Indeed you did," she responded evenly. "You gave your notice, and I have the proof of it in writing." All Eleanor could do was repeat the phrase like a mantra, "But I didn't retire. I'm not ready to retire." She looked desperately at the other employee, who simply refused to meet her gaze or come to her defense. Laura pointed to the box of her things. "We wish you a happy retirement, Eleanor. It's time for you to leave the office." Jane's shock curdled into defiance. She quickly rifled through the box and noticed the index cards were missing. "Where's my client box?" she demanded. "I need that." "I'm sorry, I can't give that to you," Laura stated. "It is the property of the business. It contains private client information, and it would be a violation of Canadian privacy laws for me to let you take it." Eleanor dug in her heels, her panic turning to obstinance. She refused to leave without the box. The other employee and Laura's boyfriend both started telling her to just leave. Finally, Laura said, "Eleanor, if you don't leave now, we will have to call the RCMP." At that, her boyfriend took out his phone and dialed 911, calmly informing the dispatcher that a disgruntled former employee was refusing to leave the premises of the travel agency. Within minutes, 2 police officers arrived. Eleanor rushed towards them, ranting about being fired and how Laura was stealing her box of client information. One officer, skilled in de-escalation, calmly asked Eleanor to step outside with him to tell her side of the story. The other officer remained inside to hear Laura's account. After seeing the emails and understanding the situation, he agreed completely that the client information was business property and not Eleanor's to take. Eventually, the first officer came back inside and confirmed Jane was insisting the box was her personal property. Both Laura and the second officer quickly explained the contents of the box, and he agreed it was not Jane's property. The officers then took the larger box of Eleanor's actual personal belongings, carried it outside to her, and told her it was time to go home, but Laura wasn't quite finished. To rub salt in the wound, the very next day she put a large sign in the agency's front window. Congratulations to Eleanor on her retirement. She even took out a small announcement in the local newspaper saying the same thing. The final, most satisfying piece of revenge, however, came when Laura filled out the official government forms for Eleanor's departure. In the section for the reason the employee was no longer with the company, she checked the box labeled retired. By doing so, she legally and correctly ensured that Eleanor was ineligible to collect any unemployment insurance benefits. As another commenter on the original story put it, the final 2 sentences are what sealed the deal for me. All legal and well executed. This story is a powerful reminder that when dealing with manipulators, sometimes the best strategy is to let them overplay their hand and then hold them to their word, legally and decisively. Have you ever had to deal with someone who tried to use threats or bluffs to get their way? What do you think is the best way to handle that kind of situation?